I'm happy to welcome you to episode 7, where we'll be making a timer and much more while learning essential C# methods and tricks like IEnumerators, the way of coding coroutines. We're also getting a glimpse of how arrays can be used in Unity and how to change text colors in C#. Since we have a lot to do, let's get started right away. Hi, I'm a part-time indie developer and illustrator. I've gained my knowledge through thousands of online tutorials, and now I want to give something back and share these skills with you. If you like these videos, subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos coming up, and if you want to support me, check out my website that contains my published games and a detailed dev blog and much more, or hit me up on Twitter. And again, under our canvas, and create a UI text element and call this countdown text. To make it as easy as possible, we will just snap it to the upper right, zero this stuff out. Now we can easily go in here and say, okay, let's make it as, let's set the width the same as the frame is, and let's move it to the middle. Something like this. Let's make it best fit, and let's say this is the countdown. So first of all, we need a public float for the timer, and let's set this to 30.0f at the very beginning. So this is our start time, and let's also make a reference to this by saying float without public, because we don't need to access it. We don't want to pass any value into it from our Unity editor, and this will be a start or timer start value, because sometimes we want to reset it. Public text timer text. Alright, and at the start we want our timer text dot text to be the timer value. Oh, and because timer is a float value and not a string, that's what it's complaining about. The type float cannot be implicitly converted to string. We need to add this dot to string. Let's go and create another void, and we call this void update. Here we go. Timer minus equals time with a capital T dot delta time. Time dot delta time is the past time that we want to subtract from the timer. And we can easily say again, if the timer is less or equal to 0, which means if the timer is at 0, we can, here it's timeout, and we can do something. And else, if it's not the case, let's display it. Let's show the player or the user that the time is counting down. So what do? We say timer text dot text equals our current timer, and now we need to say toString, and let's see what happens if we just write it like this. Of course, we need to go to our game controller and assign a couple of things. For example, the timer text, which we have created, must be put in here, and we have a huge number counting down with a lot of digits. And we can easily prevent this by just going here and say 00.0. This will enable us to see one digit counting down, which is also a pretty neat effect. Or if you want it less complicated, just start like this and it will count down. You can still see in the timer script how it's counting down. So now let's change the timer a little bit. Let's say 3 seconds. Let's see if this works with executing something. Debug.log. Time is over. It should in fact print this. If you have this clear on play enabled, it will always clear everything when you start the game over again. So let's see, 3, 2, 1, and time is over. And it keeps shooting this, of course, because it always checks if it's counting. And yeah, this is a little bit annoying, and you see we have already 600 or 700 calls of this, because 600 or 700 frames have passed since we've called this. Let's clear it, adding a Boolean that is called isCounting. And we call this to set this to true at the beginning. So what is a Boolean? A bool can either be true or false. And it is often used when we, for example, say we want to have an if-else statement. So if isCounting is true, and we can write it this way, or we can just say if isCounting. That's all right, doesn't need more. Then we can say else, and this part will be executed if it's not counting anymore. We can also do the opposite. If we put this exclamation mark before isCounting, then it means the same like isCounting equals false. And see, I'm making 2 of these equal signs, because this one means assigning or setting it to true, and with 2 it means checking if it is true. So let's just start this practical example. isCounting, we say we want to execute all of this stuff only if isCounting is true. So we put all of this inside isCounting, and because isCounting is true, we can set it true in start, or really already define it as true at the beginning. We want to execute this, and else we want to do nothing, so we can also leave this blank. We can, for example, set it to false in here and say isCounting equals false as soon as it's below 0. Let's see if it still gives us that many shots in the console. 3, 2, 1, and we get 1 single call that the time is over. Perfect. Now that we saw that this is working, I suggest that we put all the stuff that we do whenever the timer should be over in a separate function. We can call it void timeout, and inside this method we just put in all the stuff that we want to do as soon as time is over. So for now it's the debug log and the counting set to false. And now to call this method and the functionality within, we just can take timeout, put it up here, brackets and semicolon. This will call now the timeout function. Let's hit save and see if everything is still running. And if we now see 2, 1, 0, yes, it's still called. And to spice things a little bit up, we have the countdown, and we can change the color of the text. And instead of calling timeout, if the timer is still counting, which is indicated through our else, again with an if statement, if the timer is greater than timer start value divided by 2, we would like to have, for example, a green text, because we still have more than half of the time left. So we can say timer text, and now access the color equals a color dot green. So if it's still more than half time left, the color will display as green. Now what we used before was a if-else statement. If the timer is below 0, we want to trigger timeout, and if it's not below 0, then we do something else. But there's another possibility, we call it an else if statement, and this allows us to make here a new condition. For example, we say if the timer is now smaller or equal to this one, but at the same time, and that's indicated through two of these, it's still bigger. So we say again timer, but it's this time still bigger than timer start value divided by 3. Then we're gonna trigger something else. Then we want to make the timer dot color, timer text dot color equal to a color dot blue. And so we can continue and give another else if statement. So if we say it's smaller than the previously bigger than condition, so if the timer is this time smaller, equal to a third of it, but it's still bigger than, let's say, divided by 6, we can make the color yellow. And last but not least, we can say if the timer is smaller than 6, so let's make no other condition here, then it's red. One thing that is still missing is the timer start value. Yet, if we go in, it would remain green because we only have this condition valid because timer start value isn't set up correctly. So we go to the start and say the timer start value equals timer. So when the game starts, we will have this timer start value set equal to timer, and then it will use the one that we put in here into the timer. So I'm going to save this, and I went into my game controller before and I changed the timer to a higher number so that we actually can see the changes. So let's hit play and see. At 10 it's green. As soon as we go below 5, because it's divided through 2, it's to turn blue. Perfect. And now yellow, and it's red. Perfect. And it stays red. We will see how we can actually make something with the timeout function. Yet it doesn't do much, but let's change this and make a new type of ENumerator and call it start robbery. And this is a special type. This is called a coroutine, and this allows us to yield return new wait for seconds. So it allows us to do stuff where we wait a little time and then return this time value. So to call this function, let's take this one and put it down here. Time is over, and maybe let's say we wait 1 second, or let's say 2 to make it more clear. Copy this one. This is just to show you how it works. And we waited 2 seconds. So I can't call this simply by saying start robbery. This wouldn't work. We have to call start coroutine and then in the brackets put in start robbery. Here we go. Be careful because this might not trigger an error message. I hit save, and now what should happen is that we wait for the timeout that gets triggered when the time is below 0. Then we call this, we will see time is over, we wait 2 seconds, then we wait actually 2 seconds, and then it should print we waited 2 seconds. So let's see. Now, as previously, our text color is changing to blue firstly, then to yellow, and to red as soon as we get to the board. Time is over, we wait 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds, you can see it right here. We waited 2 seconds, then it triggered. The coroutine should work. Now, what are we gonna do in here? We're gonna first of all make it become night. So let's go up. Here, let's make a public game object array where we can later on put all the things inside that should change color when it becomes night. And to make this understandable, let's name it all objects that need to color change at night. Because when the timeout method gets called, it's actually becoming night in our museum. Save and go back into Unity, and something will happen after Unity compiles. We will see that we have now this little arrow that we can click on and define a size for all the objects that need to color change at night. So we can first of all go with 3, and we have now, as soon as we put in a number here, the possibility to put as many game objects inside as we want. So this is like a container for all our game objects that we want to become darker at night. So let's see what could become darker at night. The floor. We want the player as well to become darker. We want the walls to become darker. So that means we need a couple of more of these. I go with 20. So walls top, walls bot, and of course all the paintings. So here we go. We could access this by code. That would be easier than dragging all the stuff inside, but at the same time it would be a little bit more of a overkill, so we leave it as it is. So I think we have 15. Yep, perfect. So we have now assigned all the things that should change color when it becomes night, when the time is over, in our array. So we can even close this again by clicking on the arrow. So now in our start robbery, we can set for everything that is inside our game object array a new color. So for example, let's go and say for each, and now if you double tap the tab key on your keyboard, it will autofill it. But I'm just typing it out. So for each game object, because there are game object arrays, in let's call them night objects, in, and now we define where we're searching these game objects, and that was our all objects that need to color change array. And now inside of these we can handle each one of these night objects. So for each night object we're going to get the component of type sprite renderer and access the color in there. So what are we doing? We are going inside. Okay, this is triggering only an error because I didn't write it to an end. So for example, the floor has a sprite renderer attached to it, and this sprite renderer that we are accessing by calling get component sprite render has a color right here that we can change. Alright, and because simply setting it to black would make the picture pitch black, we can go up here and define a public color, night color. Take this one and put it right down here. So this will now make all night objects that have this sprite render component and take its color and make it to our night color. So, or change it to our night color. So let's go to our game controller and see, yes, we got a night color. Let's click on it, and now attention, somehow the alpha, which means the transparency, is set to 0. Let's pump this up to the max. If you don't do this, you will all the time wonder why nothing is changing, because the alpha is too low. So let's pump this up and say, okay, let's go with a gray. You can see it either here or here. Okay, that's gonna be our night color. Let's see if it works. Oh yeah, we're counting down again from 10 to 0. I can still move. That also works. And now I have to wait 2 seconds and suddenly it became night. So perfect. Everything seems to work fine. There are more things that we could also implement, like change background color and stuff, but I think it's fine for now. Okay, for the next step, let's make the player not walk around while the change from day to night is happening. So let's go back to our script, get up here again, and make a public, and this time a static Boolean for can move. And we set that to true by default. And also in the start method. And because we made it a static bool, a public static bool, we can now, I save it in here, go to player movement and say only walk if, and now I can easily grab just the class name, quest dot, and you can already see can move, and only if the player can move we can walk around. So let's copy this into this if statement. So I saved this as well, and now let's test if we can walk around if can move is set to false. So let's go to our quest script. As soon as we go to timeout, we can say can move is false. And in here, after we wait 2 seconds, let's set can move to true again. This is just for testing purposes at the moment. So, but let's test, and I'm going to set the timer a little bit lower again to 3 seconds, just to reduce waiting time for us when we test. So you can say, see here, it changes very rapidly. So now I'm pressing left and right and I couldn't move, and now I can again. So it is working. So let's bring this in an order that makes sense. So when we hit start robbery, we want immediately to get nighttime visuals. So we start with this. We can get rid of this. Wait 2 seconds. And maybe we can print we have to wait 2 seconds, and then the player can move again. And that's not the only thing that we're gonna do. We can also choose with another public static bool is night. That's by default false if we are currently having a nighttime situation. So let's set this to false at our beginning because we started daytime. And here in the timeout we can say, before even we make can move to false, is night is true. We're doing this is night variable, or we're generating it to later have some kind of check if it's day or night in the painting function, so we can go and grab the painting at that specific moment. For now, return to our quest. And let's give the user a little bit time to read. So we can go in here and change the boss text.text to be the announcement text. So, and after we waited 2 seconds, then we can continue on moving. I can move now, and the text didn't change because we didn't put anything in here. Then let's say, let's grab the requested artwork and deliver it. Press space to grab one and press space again to deliver it at the tunnel. Okay, let's assume he made a tunnel or something, and we're gonna create this tunnel. Let's just check if it works. So we should see now the let's grab. Yeah, I can walk around. Now I can't, and it changed. Very well done. In this episode you learned a lot of essential things which you will surely encounter on your personal indie dev journey. Believe it or not, in the next episode we will have almost finished our game. For this purpose we will define a winning condition for it and use handy switch statements to check if the correct artwork was delivered by the player. If open questions exist, write them in the comments and get in touch with me. See you next time. Cheers!